great to be here today. Thank you very much for staying. I'm here to talk to you about conviction, and the reason why is if you are a fan of a lot of startup-oriented conferences, if you read startup blogs, if you follow what a lot of people say about entrepreneurship, you'll read a lot about things like A/B testing, like analytics, like finding product market fit, and all these tools to help you figure out what it is you're actually doing. And I have nothing against these tools. But I do think that this isn't the way that we've built Twilio since we started. The reason why is, sort of we have this idea that if you were to actually just follow what the A/B testing told you, if you just did A/B testing to perfection, you'd end up in any website executing A/B testing to perfection will just turn out to be a porn site. And so you cannot just do what these tools tell you to do. You have to have something greater guiding you. And that something is conviction. And I've learned it the hard way through the course of my career as an entrepreneur. And I wanted to share a story with you to tell you about how I learned this lesson. See, I started my first company when I was still a college student. I was an undergraduate studying at the University of Michigan when the web just came out, and it just came out like it's a product. Anyway, I was learning about this web, and I wanted to start building applications for it. It was the mid-'90s, and I was really excited by that. And as a college student, I had seen around campus a lot of these lecture note services where you could go, and they would sell you a copy of the lecture notes for the courses you were in as a study guide. And I knew how popular they were around campus. And so we started this company called Versity.com in the late 90s. To use the web as a medium to publish this content for college students. And we started it as a side project, but quickly it took off, and we started a company around it. We ended up raising about $10 million of venture capital and moved the company out to San Francisco to continue growing it. And around that time, we were 21-year-olds that the venture capitalists handed all this money to, and they said, yeah, we want you to bring in some people. So we hired these C-level people with C titles in their names, CEO, CFO. We hired a CMO. And I remember one of the first things that this CMO did, Chief Marketing Officer did, when he came on board, is he started holding focus groups with college students. And I remember feeling very confounded by this, because I was saying, well, we're college students. We started this company. Just look here at the founders. We know what we're doing. That's why we started this company, because we were building a product for ourselves. And we had that conviction because we knew what we were building. But the hired guns that we brought in didn't. And I always thought that was such a strange thing. Like, hey, don't look at the focus group. Just talk to us. We're right here. It's free. Well, that was my first company. We ended up selling that in a fairly typical .com story. We sold it to one of our competitors, and the competitor soon went out of business. But that was okay. I moved on to my next thing, which was a friend of mine was one of the co-founders of Stubhub. I don't know how many of you know Stubhub. It's just like Viagogo in the UK. If you know Viagogo, it's an ability for people to buy and sell live event tickets online from each other. So concerts, sporting events, things like that, eBay for live events. And we were starting this company, and the founders came to me, and I was just rolling off my first company. They said, hey, we're about to get this thing started. Do you want to join as the first CTO and help us build the technology and build the site and get the whole thing launched? I said, hey, that sounds like a blast. It sounds like an interesting market. It sounds like there's a lot of demand for event tickets being sold in the second market. Okay, I'll do that. I'd sort of rolling off my first startup, was looking to use my experience to build something again. And so I joined Stubhub, and I started doing the hard work that you do when you're building a company from nothing. And we built the team, built the technology, figured out what the product was going to do, and many hard nights, working all night. We had a really tough launch schedule. We were trying to launch for the American football season in the fall. And I remember something happened after a period of time. After putting in all these long nights and all this hard work, I realized something. I thought this was an interesting business opportunity, sure. Was there a big market for live event tickets, secondary trading? Absolutely. But I didn't go to a lot of concerts. I didn't go to a lot of sporting events. I wasn't the customer we were building this thing for. To me, it was just e-commerce for some other thing. And when I realized that, I said, how can I endure these long nights, the blood, sweat, and tears? I was working 21-hour days to get this thing launched, and I just ran out of steam because I didn't viscerally care that the world had this product. So when I figured that out, it was around the time that one of the investors from my first company approached me and said, "Hey, Jeff, what are you doing? Do you want to work on starting a new company?" And I said, "Maybe. Doing what?" He said, "I don't know. Why don't you come out to my summer home in the Hamptons and we'll brainstorm and we'll figure out something new to start." And at that point in time, it sounded really like a really great idea. So I actually did that. Went out to the resort part of New York where all the people go to spend their summers, and at this guy's winter home. So we were there in the middle of the winter. It was completely desolate because this is the resort town. And we spent time brainstorming, me and one of my other co-founders and this investor, and we brainstormed like 1,000 ideas. 100 of them were half decent. About 24 we actually wrote business plans for. But of all the things, the business we ended up starting out of that whole session brainstorming was an idea that my co-founder had had almost a decade earlier. The idea was a bricks and mortar retail chain for extreme sporting goods. Skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, things like that. And to do what, I don't know if you have REI here, what basically do a big box retailer format. There'll be experiential. You'd have a skate park in the store and sell all the goods, and it'd be an amazing retail experience because we identified that it was like a $15 billion market. It was growing at 30% every year, and there was no such retailer. It was just waiting for someone to come and do this, and so we were pretty convinced that this was a good idea. And strangely, of all the technology ideas that we brainstormed and came up with, the only idea that all three of us could agree on was a good business idea was this one. And so we agreed that this is what we were going to do, except I had this reservation. I sort of said, well, I'm a technologist and I'm interested in figuring out the technology of building a company, a retail business in 2002, 2003, around that time frame, from scratch and building all the technology you need to run a great retail business. So I'm sort of intrigued by that, but I had this issue. I don't know if you can tell. I don't exactly look like a surfer. I do not have the amazing, physique of a skateboarder. I can barely balance on 2 feet on the stage. Okay? I was not a participant in these sports. But you know what I said? I'll do it anyway. It'll be interesting. It's a good business opportunity, and I bet I'll get to work on some interesting problems. And so we did. We moved out to Los Angeles, started this company down there, and guess what? I'm sitting in the back room of this skate shop trying to write code, and I came to hate this business. I hated the products, I hated the customers, I hated the market, I hated our employees, because when you're trying to write code in the back of a skate shop, and on the other side of the wall there's all these skate rats, and we designed the store to skate everything. By design, we wanted them to skate everything, and right on the other side of the wall I got all these kids grinding on everything and landing their decks. And I'm trying to code. And they keep breaking my flow. I came to hate this entire endeavor. And it made me realize that I had made the same mistake again. I started a business for which I did not have conviction around the product and around the customer that we were serving. I did not viscerally believe that the world needed to sell another skateboard, unless potentially it was used by me to hit someone over the head. When I realized all that, I said, it's time for me to not be doing this, and so I took a job at Amazon. Now, it may seem weird to go to Amazon, but I'd done 3 companies in a row, startups, and I wanted to understand what a big company was like. I had heard that there were these big companies, these big tall buildings that people walked into from 9 to 5 and left, but I had no idea what they did during the day, because all I'd ever done with my life was startups. And so I picked what I thought was a well-run big company to go get some experience at, and Amazon was it. I went there for a few years, learned a lot about how big companies work, invaluable experience, but I knew it was time to leave because I wanted to start something again. And here's where it gets interesting. I looked at a bunch of different ideas, and I was pretty sure I didn't want to make the same mistake again. And I'm looking at a bunch of ideas, and I have this one realization. that at every single one of my 3 previous companies, we had needed communications as a core part of building the business that we were building. Right? Not like a desk phone for every employee, but actually communications that was somehow integrated into the software that I was building in order to make for some great customer experience, to make some workflow function, to make it so we could communicate with our users and deliver some sort of delightful experience. And every time this happened, I'm a developer. I'd say, well, that's really neat, but I'm a software developer. I don't know anything about communications. So I'd turn to the industry, the communications industry, and say, how are we supposed to build this? And the answer I got from the industry was always, sure, we can help you out. First, you're going to wire up all these lines from the carriers. Then you're going to rack up all these telco-ish boxes. And then you're going to bring in professional services to come and integrate all that together. And it's going to be $2 million, and it's going to take 2 years. Here's where you sign. And every time I had this reaction, I remember saying, oh, it's so weird. Well, aside from the fact that we're a startup and we don't have $2 million, we're software people. Everything we do is iterative. We don't do anything that takes 2 years. We start small. We ship every 2 weeks. We're constantly iterating, listening to customers and getting feedback. That's the software ethos. And I realized that communications was about the opposite of the software ethos. And so we started Twilio in 2008 to solve this problem, to migrate communications from its 150-year legacy in hardware to its future in software. And the way I validated this idea, I wanted to get a sense if this idea was any good. And I started talking to potential customers, and this is how I vetted all sorts of ideas. I'll go talk to people who would be potential customers of the idea, and I'd explain the idea to them, and I'd say, so, would you have a use case for it? So I'll give you an idea. I had an idea for a BitTorrent-based cable box around the same time, and I went to people who I thought would be likely customers of this, and I said, hey, I have this idea for a BitTorrent-based cable box. It means you could watch cable from anywhere in the world for free. Would you want that? Would it be useful to you? And a funny thing happens when you bring an idea to a likely audience like that. You get this feedback really quickly. Because if they're friends of yours, they're people you know, they don't want to be rude. And so they'll listen and they'll say, huh. And then they'll try to change the subject. So, how about them Tottenham Hotspurs? And you're like, oh, okay. Well, I guess it wasn't a good idea. All right. Well, and it happens enough times where people just kind of politely try to change the subject awkwardly. You get the idea that it's not a good idea. But with Twilio, a funny thing happened. I'd go to developers and I'd say, hey, what if you had this tool that lets your code, make phone calls and send text messages and do all this neat stuff? And a funny thing happened. I talked to all these different developers, and they said, so how about Tottenham? And I'd start to think, oh, I guess it's a bad idea. But then a funny thing happened. Maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes later, they would say, hey, actually, I have a question. Remember that communications thing you were talking about a minute ago? Could I don't know, send a shipment reminder when someone's package ships from my e-commerce site? And I'd say, yeah, of course you could. I'd say, oh, that's interesting. And the gears would start turning. I could see the smoke coming out. And they would start generating these ideas. And they'd say, oh, well, let me try that out. And after I saw that happen a bunch of times, I developed this conviction that this is what we wanted to do. So I dropped everything else that I was doing, started building Twilio. Now, funny thing happened. I went to go raise money after about 8 months. We were building. We didn't have anything. We hadn't raised $1. We were taking no salaries. All we were doing was building the product, putting it in front of customers, and getting their feedback. And we got to raise money from angel investors. This was the summer of 2008. Now, aside from this being a horrible time to raise money for anything, we took Twilio in front of investors, and we heard this common thread. We heard this thread that said, well, that's an interesting idea, but why are you building this for developers? Developers aren't a market. Developers don't buy anything. Well, you know what you should do? You should go build a PBX. Go build a call center. Go build some SaaS application and add an API to it. After you're successful, many years down the line. Hey, that's what Facebook did. Seemed to work out well for them. And we said, okay, all right, I got you. And we thought about it. And actually, the entire summer went by. We didn't raise $1 of venture capital. Now, it didn't help that we walked out of, one of the biggest investors in Silicon Valley. We walked out of their office on the day Lehman Brothers collapsed. That didn't help. But after an entire summer of fundraising, we hadn't raised a single dollar. And we looked at each other and we said, should we quit? Should we throw in the towel? The investors are saying, this is a bad idea. And we looked at each other and you know what we said? We said, yeah, investors are saying that, but our customers, developers are saying something else, and our own conviction about having needed this product ourselves says something else. And so we said, we don't need money, we're just gonna launch. And so literally we raised a small amount of money from our friends and family, like $30,000 from our parents, and we launched with $30,000 in the bank account. And you know what? Developers came, they started paying us. I remember my co-founder being startled the first day we launched. Oh my God, they're giving us their credit cards. They trust us, holy shit. And as soon as developers started coming, as soon as customers started coming and paying us, I remember Sony became a customer on the second day we were live. Well, then suddenly investors were interested. And we ended up raising money and going. Actually, a quick funny story in the middle there. Before we could raise any money, I got married. And you know what my wife and I did to extend the runway of the business? We returned all of our wedding gifts. It felt great. It's the best ROI I've ever had on anything. So this is the story about how trusting your gut, going with your conviction about what you know is right, will lead you well. And you should use those tools: A/B testing, analytics, customer testing. Use all those things to benefit you. But at the end of the day, you have to care about the product you're building and the customer you're serving. And you have to viscerally feel like the world needs that product so that you have that gut, you have that conviction to follow. And if you do that, you will love your company, you will love your customers, you will love life, and you will love your career. So I encourage you, follow your conviction. Thank you very much.